animal experimentation is relevant to your point. And we are, of course, very often asked, we experimental scientists, whether experimentation with laboratory animals is ethically justified or not. Now, most of my colleagues will give long answers and try to explain that it is indeed ethically acceptable because our children's life will be protected and will be protected from diseases. But I wouldn't use that argument. I would rather say like this, that no, experimentation on animals is ethically not acceptable. But let's not be hypocritical about it. We, humans, our species, have the power on this planet. And for us, the health of our children is more important than protecting mice and rats. And that's why we have taken this privilege. That's what the situation is. But we have to be honest about it. Ethically, it's not defensible.
Well, as a Christian ethicist, I'm not that well informed on Muslim and Jewish ethics. But I have to say that there's a lot of Christian animal ethics that is working a lot on these topics, and it has been the last 30 years. And a lot of it is going on in Sweden, both in Uppsala and in Lund, at the theological faculty. So there is quite a long tradition in the Christian theology, quite opposed to what Peter was telling us earlier, that there is a pattern also in the biblical scriptures, actually, that is deriving from the tradition on, I can't remember the term in English now, förvaltarskap, in the biblical scriptures, in the Old Testament. That the human has a special duty to take care of the animals and not to torture the animals. So there is this tradition. And that is the problem, of course, with the scriptures, that you can read a lot of these texts in two ways. Like, for example, the Exodus story that has been read in two ways, both to oppress the black people as well as to liberate them. And there's a lot of textures that have been used this way. Like, for example, text that has been used to oppress homosexuals as well as to liberate them, and the blacks and animals and so on. So there's a lot of different interpretations, but there are a lot of theologians and Christian ethicists that are working on these topics as well. And there's a lot of Christian vegetarians. I am not among them. My son read your book, the Marxist one, and he was a vegetarian for 8 months, and then it was very boring, and then he said, life is too short, so I am a hedonist now. So
okay, we have time.
I think you're right.
We have time for one
People are lazy.
one last short question from the audience, and then we have to finish, actually. So, please.
Yes, I am Matthias Goldman, and I have a question for, was it Professor Ann Heberlein, or?
No, I'm only a doctor.
Oh, I'm...
but I'm planning to be a professor.
Dr. Heberlein, yes. There was a distinction made in the debate between political questions that were affected by religious belief, and if I understood you right, you were against religion in politics, was that correct?
Yes.
Where do you draw the line, what is politics and what is not politics? Because in my perspective, politics could cover exactly anything. How would you tell what is acceptable to be influenced by religion as opposed to what is not okay to be influenced by religion?
I think the principle of autonomy is fundamental. And I think that every individual is autonomous, and that is that every decision that I have to make that is only affecting my own life, I should be the one to decide. But then there are a lot of other things that is not affecting other people, and that is political decisions. And we spoke earlier about euthanasia, euthanasia. And that is something that I should be able to make a decision on by myself.
So decisions for yourself is not politics, everything else is politics.
I don't want to, jag vill inte ha eutanasi, va? But if Peter Singer wants to be able to have euthanasia, my religious beliefs shouldn't stop him to be able to have assisted suicide the day he decides he doesn't want to live anymore. But if my religious beliefs stops him from having euthanasia, that is, of course, a problem, I think. But as you say, I mean, politics is all around, all the way. When I go to the shop to buy milk, it is a political decision in one way or another, because I can decide to buy ecological milk or not, and that is, of course, politics in a way. But I think I don't want to live in a state that is a theocratic state. And I think that in Sweden we have quite a good balance between religion and politics. I think that we live in a secular state, and I want to have it that way. I think there's quite a big difference between America and Sweden, actually, and I think that you may have noticed that in the few days you have been here. Yeah. So I think that the line is quite good in Sweden, which I think also, I think that you have, I think that the Christo is involved in a book company now, and you have interpreted some very interesting books. And by reading those books, you can also have an idea of what we don't want to have in Sweden, actually. So there is quite a big cultural difference between Sweden and the United States.
So the controversial questions that were arisen that are debated all the time on abortion and homosexuality, the acceptance of adopting, etc.
Actually, we have an interesting question there, because that is a question that is infected by religious beliefs in Sweden. Because I think that it's, of course, that homosexuals should be have the right to have marriage in Sweden as well. But that is a question that we, in a way, we doesn't come any forward.
I'd like to give the last word to Professor Singer for a final statement, and then we'll close this conference.
Oh, well, I want to thank you very much for all your interesting questions and comments. And certainly, and you're right that Sweden is very different from the United States in my experience of it. It's more reminiscent of Australia in that way. I think that both Sweden and Australia are examples of societies which are secular to a significant degree, but where religious influence still plays a role. And I think it's very valuable that we can have these discussions and that we can reach some agreement, at least with those who are, may I say, liberal theologians like yourself. And perhaps that's a common ground on which we can move forward and try to implement some of the social reforms that we agree with.
Thank you very much. I'd like to say thank you to all of you who came today, and I'd like to say that check out humanisterna.se to see our next events. And of course, a very special thanks to Professor Georg Klein, to Heberlein and Peter Singer.